Welcome back to another episode of Backstage Pass with Phoenix, where we get the behind the scenes of all the entertainment. And one facet that we wanted to delve into this week was editing. Yes, behind the scenes of editing. Those people that actually have so much underrated power, I feel like, of how the final product turns out. And they really make people look good or bad. They have that power too. So we have an editor on with us right now, Shawn Paper, and you have probably seen a lot of his work. He is a Primetime Emmy nominee, and also he's worked on projects like Parks and Rec, Vampire Diaries, and the latest Netflix hit, Outer Banks. So I know so many of you are so excited for this, and we're excited to have you on, Sean. So thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. So nice to be with you, Leona.
Yeah, I ran into Sean at a film festival. He was so nice, and we just immediately just started talking, and I was like, we need to get him on the show. He's got so much cool experience. So I'm excited to hear about all of the projects, but I did also want to hear your background. Like, I wanted to hear how you got into editing, got into the sphere of Hollywood.
Right. Yes. Well, the interesting thing is that I had not intended to go into editing, and I don't know. Uh, my trajectory was a liberal arts major, majored in the humanities, and really was into story. And I had a degree in literature and theater, so I was a theater kid. Um, and I went out to Hollywood to work in theater, and I realized that uh, acting was well. I had a professor who had told me. He sat down with me and another actor and said, "You two are great, and you're really good actors, but you're not going to get any work until you're in your 40s."
Oh,
Um, and so and so I said, well, I don't want to wait to my 40s. So I went another route. And the other guy stuck to it, and the other guy is Peter Dinklage. So Peter Dinklage, he stayed with it, and look who Peter is today. But he and I both came up together, uh, and and I went into the making of film. I fell in love with filmmaking, and but didn't like going on sets at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
mm,
So certainly being in the room with a director, a producer, and being just doing creative problem solving all day became uh, um, the joy that I felt for my contribution. Like I thought, wow, what a cool gig! I get to put a puzzle together all day, and I get paid to do it. So so from but having that theater training and the training in story structure in literature, and specifically like Greek plays, and learning how the trajectory of like the hero's journey is integral to how you create meaningful story, uh, was a shorthand for me in how I approached editing, and it really allowed me to find the faults or elevate storylines that needed to um, uh, enforce the journey of our characters. So that's been really good to me. And then I was lucky enough to become the hands of an 80-year-old film editor. My first job was working um, on the Dallas reunion movies of the week. There were two of them that were done in the early 90s. And I assisted the first president of ACE, uh, which is the honorary editors um, um, uh, fraternity, and it and he was 82 years old and never touched a mouse or a keyboard before. He had come up cutting the Hopalong Cassidy shorts, and then MASH and All in the Family. And he did Dallas, and they brought him back to cut these MOWs, but he had never used a mouse or a keyboard. And
Wow.
I was his hands. He taught me. I was operating the system, and he stood behind me, and he taught me how to cut. So I had this wonderful uh, apprenticeship with this great teacher, and we had a really wonderful mentor apprentice relationship, which certainly launched my career.
Wow. So, and how did you run into him?
Well, the long story short, the you know I did come out to California as from with theater in mind, but I also paid for college by enlisting in the U.S. Navy. So I was in the Navy for 6 years, and the Navy brought I joined the Naval Construction Battalion, the Seabees, and I joined the Navy's Desert Battalion, and thinking that that would probably be a safe place to be, because why would the Navy operate in the desert? And so I got activated from my inactive from my reserve status to work to go out to California um, and be play in the sand in the California desert for when Desert Storm first happened, and but consequently, I'd done a lot of work in computer and when I interviewed at Warner Brothers, they saw that I had this naval background. They said, "Oh, you're in the Navy. Do you know computers?" And I said, "Yeah." That wasn't my job at all. I was an equipment operator. My job was to drive bulldozers through minefields. But I said, "Yeah, I know computers." And they said, "Okay, great. Well, we're going to hook you up with this guy who's not done it before." So I think the
Oh,
confluence of my having been that was the thing on my resume which seemed to stick out that
yeah.
to them and to this older gentleman, Fred Berger, that they said, "Okay, well, you just help him out." And I guess that's that was one of the things that differentiated me probably from somebody else.
That's so interesting. I love hearing people's stories because no one's a straight pathway. It's not like there's one clear-cut way to make it in Hollywood or to break into the industry. It's like everyone has this convoluted and very specific uh, pathway to them. It's so interesting to hear, you know, you kind of just do what you feel is right in your life, and it kind of comes together the way that it needs to if you're kind of following that, you know. I love hearing that. We're gonna take a quick break, but I want to hear more about kind of the work that you've done and where you went from there, from just, getting this great apprenticeship and where you went from there. So we're gonna take a quick break and we'll be back on Backstage Pass with Phoenix. We're here with Shawn Paper, who is an editor of many acclaimed films and television shows, such as Parks and Rec, Vampire Diaries, and the new Netflix hit Outer Banks, which, I mean, the audience just loved it when they heard that you were going to come on. And you were talking in the past segment about how you fell into editing almost, and it was kind of this convoluted path. You started with theater and you went out to Hollywood for some acting, right? And then you got into the film industry and other aspects, and you went to the Navy, and then you got an apprenticeship somehow in editing, and here you are. So we left off with that apprenticeship. How then did you get onto hit shows like Vampire Diaries, Parks and Rec, and Outer Banks?
Well, it was a long journey. There were many years that I worked as an apprentice or as an assistant editor, and in those days, the assistant editor really was able to work in synergy with the editor much more closely than we do now, unfortunately. So I was in the room with some really great, formative editors on my career, and and assisted. At the time, it was the golden age of movies of the week. So I was doing movie of the week after movie of the week, where I was learning longer format, but still concentrated in television. And it happened that it was at the confluence of digital filmmaking and digital editing, where nonlinear film editing was taking over from people cutting on film, and I was consistently getting jobs for people who hadn't weren't comfortable in the computer environment, and so I was luckily enough to continue working and building a resume and on movies of the week, and that led to a relationship with the creator of Ugly Betty, Silvio Horta. And Silvio and I had worked together on three other shows before that. I had, well, no, two other shows. We did, uh, it was maybe my third or fourth editing job. When I'd moved up from an assistant to working on a show that was called The Chronicle. It was a sci-fi series, and then we did another sci-fi series, and he brought me on to Ugly Betty, which became a hit. And Ugly Betty was this. Uh, it was on everybody's radar, and it steered me into wanting to create stories uh, about that challenged the Hollywood stereotype of either beauty or sexuality or um, uh, or even a gender um, and underdog stories. So I really started to gravitate towards that. I started getting a lot of opportunities as a half-hour comedy guy. So so that led to working on Flight of the Conchords, and working on Flight of the Conchords was an amazing uh, uh, connection with Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement. And Jermaine and Taika had brought me back to do What We Do in the Shadows, but that's down the road. So working with people like Jermaine and Taika led to working on Parks and Recreation and Veep, and learning how to cut comedy that was part mumblecore, part improv, and but still within a story structure. So I got really good at doing the writing process of the editing, where I'm not taking a linear story and I'm allowing these improvs to guide the story along.
Yeah, I
And
guess that is one
so,
question. Like as you're editing, do you have any tips on editing for comedy versus drama? Because it is all about the timing. So I think you,
right.
as an editor, play such a heavy part in that.
Oh, indeed, indeed. I think it's uh, um, that Victor Fleming, the who directed The Wizard of Oz, said that um, a, uh, a good editor makes a film look well directed. A great editor makes a film look like it wasn't directed at all. So I won't say that I'm ever going to replace a director, or AI will, but I do think that that I can dig in and make something better for having had the tools and the working knowledge to integrate improv moments into the story and make it more authentic or more uh, or more or find those golden nuggets of uh, that that happened by chance when the right camera angle at the right time hit the right performance, and we got a little piece of gold, which would. So what I would do is I'd go through and watch all the dailies, and I'd find those moments that stuck out to me. So my advice would be, watch all your dailies and look and take notes for those things, those sparks, those things that just happen, once, or maybe even on one camera, and it's irrepeatable, and find a way to build around that. So I think that really digging into performance and being a good audience member. I think as an editor, you really need to say, okay, what do I like about this? And then you say, what do you love about this? And then as an editor, you sort of have to fall in love with what you do. So I have to fall in love with my characters, and that takes a lot of elbow grease. It's like a relationship. It takes a lot of work to fall in love with your project. And when you get to that point where you love it, then care for it and you nurture it, and that and sparks lead to other sparks, and it becomes this relationship that you have with your story.
This is what I'm talking about. So the people that are listening, this is such an underrated power because a lot of times the actor or the person on camera is not in the same room as the editor, but yet they know everything about you. They're like the behind the scenes god. They like know every facial expression. They know they know all the little details of you, the quirks, to put where to put them to make the show look good. And they have this relationship with you, and I think it's so cool that you have that power, and also it's such an art. Like all of your past experience with acting, with storytelling, it you need that to be able to really take your editing to the next level, I believe. And like you can tell people that know how to put together a story and have an eye for that. And so I can tell that that's something that that you have. Do you have other tricks to making people look good? Like I know when I started in broadcasting, well, I did some broadcasting and they would tell us then, I don't even know if it's the same, but they would say like 7 seconds, like a 7 second shot is like the minimum that you wanted to do or something. I don't know if you have any like little tips like that for making people look good or editing or something.
Well, it depends on the format. Something like my last project that got into Sundance, the director wanted long takes and natural uh, uh, hidden edits. So the editing looks like it's not there. And that takes a certain art form to make sure that your performance is good and you can sustain it through a shot for 7 seconds or 30 seconds. Or if you could do a whole shot in a oneer, but a performance is not great, there are a lot of tricks that you can do to support this and hidden edits that would make it so that you could sustain a shot for that. Whereas something like Outer Banks, I probably would have 6 cuts for one sentence. So it's a certain style of editing, or if you're doing what we do in the shadows or Parks and Rec or Veep, the whip pan mockumentary style allows a certain freedom of continuity and cutting. So I think the more exposure one has to that type of filmmaking, the better choices you can make. So, cutting Parks and Rec and Veep and What We Do in the Shadows is a really hard style to master because it could very easily turn into a Baroque, um, uh, uh, dizzy spell because have this flip camera and you're using these mockumentary style. So finding a way to settle the camera but still have that free flow and pace is an art form that is completely dissimilar to how I would sustain a drama scene in a long in something like uh, uh, this rom com that I just did, Love Brooklyn, where the director was saying, I want to do as few cuts as possible. So within a shot, I would do a speed ramp or a jump cut on one side, and do an animat split screen to sustain that and keep it alive. So these are tricks that you do whatever trick you need, and you learn these tricks for the greater good of the story.
Yeah. This is fascinating. I unfortunately have to take a quick break right now, but I do have some more questions, especially regarding Outer Banks and stuff. I know people are dying to hear, so we'll jump a little bit more into that. But we'll take a quick break here on Backstage Pass with Phoenix. As promised, we have Shawn Paper here, and he is the editor of many well-known TV shows, movies, including Outer Banks from Netflix. So you mentioned in this last segment a little bit about it, about editing Outer Banks and the different how it's a different style than, other styles, I guess, other films that you've done and TV shows. So talk a little bit about that. Like, how did you know the style of Outer Banks? Did you come on for an episode and somebody had already edited some other things so you could look at it, or did you just get in with the director and say, okay, what kind of feel do you want for this? How did you know how to edit Outer Banks, I guess?
Right. Well, that this was a Outer Banks is deceptively um, um, it's a hard show to edit because it is really challenging in its scope, what it tries to be. Um, I, um, I remember showing a first cut of the episode that called the town council where JJ um, you know trashes the town, and
I was just watching that.
yeah, it's what I'm so proud of the work that I did on that. But that was I I've never taken that long to cut 1 hour of television, and it did take months,
Really?
and it took longer than the entirety of the Sundance film that I cut.
Wow.
But because it was so integral, the pieces are like they only fit together one way, and it does take time to find the malleable pieces and bring it together. So I had known Sunny Hodge, the lead editor on this for years. In fact, she had worked with me on the first project I did with Sylvia Orta, the Chronicle. So I had known her for years, and she had worked with the Pate brothers on on another project and she was always their go-to editor, and she taught me. She always wanted to bring me along because we always had a great relationship and working relationship, and she respected the work that I did. And I was never available for the first 3 seasons of Outer Banks, and she would call and ask if I was available, and I would love to do it because it's my son's favorite show. And from all the work that I've ever done, he's never been he was like, yeah, yeah, that was good. That was kind of cool, Dad. But then he heard I was on Outer Banks. He's like, "Whoa, Dad,
You're
that's awesome!"
cool.
I get the recognition from my son for a show, and but I had watched it and had been a fan of Sonny's work, and had learned, spoke with her about how she put episodes together, and it did take a long time because there was a lot of there's a lot of improv between the kids and stunt work that we would have to find the right pattern to make it work, and it really is a process of discovery
Mm.
that can't be like if we tried to cut an episode of Outer Banks in 4 weeks, it would work
Really?
because
One episode?
it, yeah, I think one episode we could not do in 4 weeks because it takes a gestation period
Wow.
of uh, months to really nail it, and it's the most polished uh, editor's cut that I've ever had to do, where my temp score and visual effects and audio work and dialogue work it has to be completely fine tuned to a point where it's almost ready to air.
Hmm.
Um, so it's you're the editor is also the music composer, the visual effects artist, the dialogue editor, the sound editor, and so it's a real um, it's a labor of love, and but it's so much fun once you get it together. And when I did that episode Town Council, and we did the riot scene with Black Sabbath, the War Pigs in it, everybody was just like, "Wow, this is amazing! This is can we get Black Sabbath?" And they went to the music supervisor, said Sabbath says no, and they're like, well, we when we tried like 100 other songs against this thing, and they're like, Sabbath, it's got to be Sabbath. Let's go to Ozzy Osbourne's house and pitch him. Let's like buy him lunch or send him like a bunch of macarons and try to uh, and ask him if we could use this. And eventually they got this, but somebody at Netflix said, "Thanks, Shawn. You just did the most expensive episode of Outer Banks we've ever done because we paid so much, had to pay so much money for the Sabbath track." And I'm like, I know, temp love.
But you got the decision, like you were like, I think that like in editing, this is the music that we need, and you had the say to say that.
So, so yeah. So uh, uh, I pitch like my first cut has to have a piece of music to it, and nothing worked better than War Pigs. So I did tell the executive producer that this particular 40-second track really works well, and but be aware that it's probably going to be really expensive. And he said, you know what, I really like it. I like the idea. Go for it. So, I think, on another show, we would have had to find a secondary piece, but something that is so popular, and, they want to put the stamp on it where it's like, it's not just going to be good for the next year or two, but it might be timeless. And so we did and in the music of Outer Banks, it was finding a timeless quality between, this amazing classic rock, seminal track. And then we found this amazing DC Fontaine's track for the first time JJ breaks a window and starts his rampage. So we were able to put classical and super modern pieces together and find a way to make it so that it would be that would work not just today or tomorrow or of the moment, but we'll be able to watch it in 5 or 10 years and say, wow, that's still cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you said that it took like more than 4 weeks for one episode. So how does it work? Do you have different, I think you had said that there's different editors that are on different episodes because you have to edit multiple episodes within in a time frame for it to come out with the season. You can't spend 1 month doing each episode, right? That would be too long. So do you have a crew of editors that all do that and you all have to learn the exact same style so it all looks cohesive? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I think you get to a point where you, as an editor, especially if the paradigm has been set, in season 4, we know what Outer Banks looks like. So you do your homework as a new editor coming on board and see what the style is, what the music is, and then ask the lead editors and producers, what do you expect of me and my first cut? And if the expectation is that it's a polished first cut worth 35 minutes of music built into the that supports the emotion and action of the show, you have to learn the music library really well, and be able to elevate the project with that. And it turns out that we had I think we had for 10 episodes we had seven editors. So basically the first two editors did episodes 1 and 2. They also did 9 and 10, but every other one had an editor that was dedicated to one show. And it seems that there are more and more shows, especially 1 hour shows that do that, where it's just one editor who spends the entire time immersed in the one story, because it takes. And then if I've got an easy day, I'll call up another editor and say, hey, can I cut a scene for you? So it's a synergy and an ability to coexist in the workspace, even if we work remotely and support each other. But one editor is the lead editor for his or her own episode.
Oh, wonderful. This is so interesting. We only have a couple minutes left. We're gonna take a quick break, but we'll wrap up with some final thoughts with Shawn. We're so grateful for your time. So we're gonna take a brief break, and we'll be back here on Backstage Pass with Phoenix. We're finishing things up with Shawn Paper, who is a wonderful and very experienced editor, and he's most recently worked, well, very recently worked on Outer Banks on from Netflix. And one of the questions that we had was, how closely do you work as an editor, or as an editor of Outer Banks, with the director? Do you ever get to meet any of the cast members? Like, how close do you get to work with the cast and stuff, or do you kind of have to be relegated to your own, your own little office over there?
Yes, I think editing is a terribly lonely sport, just like writing, and you have to be able to sustain the work without too much input. I remember working on Girls, and the I was cutting in Los Angeles, and they were shooting in New York, and I did the first four seasons, and we got to a point where Lena or Judd Apatow spent very little time in the room because we knew the show so well. And I was like, wait a minute, I'd love to spend more time in the room with you. Let's go over things together. I've worked so hard to put my first cut together so that we get to play, and that's my favorite part of the process is when I get to bring in a a director, a producer, and say, okay, now let's play.
Mhm.
And Judd Apatow appreciated that, and I worked on Crashing with him for two seasons, and we had the best time just after I put in the hard work of getting an engine running and the car running and putting it under the um, fixing everything under the hood, that he comes in and we get to, like, let's try let's try it all joke here, or, let's explore this character's journey a little more. So that's my favorite part of the process. So the the latest project I did, Love Brooklyn, was directed by Rachel Holder, who's fantastic. The first time feature director. She's done several series before, but it was executive produced by Steven Soderbergh, and Soderbergh watched our first cut, and we had a session with Soderbergh, and he watches it. He's like, "Ever seen my film, The Limey?" And I'm like, "Yeah, The Limey's fantastic. It's one of the best uh, um, edited films I've ever seen." He's like, why don't you consider liming this up? I'm like, what? That like I get somebody asks me to do my to line me up my one of my favorite editing movies, and it's Soderbergh himself saying, do this
Wow.
to this film. And it was this catharsis that um, this spark that Rachel and I both had, said, "Oh wow, we could play with time and interpose one story over another," and it really allowed us to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And it was so sometimes you get the opportunity of having someone come in the room who just lights a fire underneath you, and then you just say, okay, I'm going to cook something with this.
Yeah. But it seems like you had so much freedom. Like, I mean, you're not micromanaged by these directors. It sounds like you really have so much power, and then they kind of come in and they might change things up, but really, you're the one that's kind of taking the steering wheel for a good chunk of that, which is pretty. It's a lot of responsibility. So I guess in the last couple minutes we have here, for other budding editors, aspiring editors wanting to break into the industry, do you have any advice of what to do or what not to do?
Well, yes, I think that it depends on the medium. If you're cutting a film, it's a director's medium, and you have to respect the director and the director's point of view. And if you, I mean, there's things that happen in every project where I would do something different, but I'm there at the service of the director on a film, or I'm at the service of a producer on a TV show. I mean, so I will cut things the way I think they ought to be, and the best projects I've been on are ones where where they've respected the input that I have, because the final edited story is different than the script that they shot, and it's different than the script that they wrote. So there's a letting go process that has to happen for the team, writers, producers, and directors to make the final output better, different than what originally intended. But it's an iterative process. Like if I just said, all right, this is going to be 40% different than what they had originally intended, it would probably blow their minds.
Mhm.
So I think that it's a journey that in a way that would probably um, uh, negate the contribution that I have. But so it's some it you can only go so far at thinking outside the box from the beginning. So I think that you build a relationship, you build a sense of trust, um, and when the producer director trusts that you've got their back and that you've got the best of their intentions, then you can pitch ideas and pitch alternatives. And usually I'll usually cut the film the way I think they want it to be cut, and then I'll also have a cut in my back pocket of where I think it's going to go. And so that gives a shorthand. But so by the time I get to a point where I could say, "Hey guys, what if we eliminated the first three episodes or the first three scenes, and then just talked about them, and we caught up to the character that way." And in the once we limeed up Love Brooklyn, that's exactly what we did. We took maybe like the first 20 seconds of the first scene, which was a 6-minute scene, got rid of everything else, and then went four scenes later, and it was fine. But if we had done that from my first cut, I don't think anyone would have been receptive to it.
Yeah,
So
that's
build the trust, have an alternative in your back pocket, and once this trust is there, then start you trust your intuition, but um, let give the rest of the team time to digest that.
I like that. Yeah,
Once you've built that.
I like that. That's beautiful. We have to wrap things up now. I'm so grateful for your time. But you did mention Love Brooklyn, which is actually how I met Shawn Paper. He did a Sundance film. Sundance film. We didn't even talk about that. That's another huge accomplishment. But if people wanted to hear more about your work, about this Sundance film that you just did, and all the other work, where can they go to connect with you?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, you get me on Instagram. I'm uh, as my name is Shawn Paper, so my Instagram handle is Spaperboy, Paperboy.
Yes, Paper.
So that's where you can find me on Instagram, or on Twitter. I'm Paper Cutter, no E's, one T, PAPRCUTR. So uh,
Okay.
I'm there and always interested to talk film and TV and the power of editing. And
Awesome.
it's an amazing craft. It's a great job. And anybody else who wants to put puzzles together all day, like that's my jam. That's what I love to talk about and love to do.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate your time. And thank you for listening to this and watching it. Share it with your friends. You can find it now anywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube at Backstage Pass with Phoenix. We'll catch you next time.